So this is called The Rise of the Legal Engineer. What was fun, I think some of you have gleaned this. I retired 9 months ago. So when I sat down with these folks, it was fun for me because I was learning something, and we're going to hop right into it. But here, I just want to begin. Let's begin with some brief introductions. I'm going to start with Megan and go down the row, and then I'm just going to start asking questions, and we're going to get this conversation going.
Great. So thanks, Joshua. I'm Megan McMillin. I'm the Senior Practice Innovation Manager at Cleary Gottlieb, former practicing M&A attorney, and I've been at Cleary for about a year and a half.
Awesome. John Scrudato, Director of Practice Engineering at Cooley. My background is originally an engineer, somehow wandered my way into law school, got an interest in operations and kind of how to apply technology to legal process, and currently lead a team that does a lot of internal and bespoke development for strategic capabilities.
I'm Joe Green, Chief Innovation Officer at Gunderson Dettmer. Always count on Stephanie. I practiced at a law school as a practicing lawyer for 7 years, first at Simpson and then at Gunderson, so I was a startup lawyer there. And then I spent 4.5 years at Thomson Reuters, our previous speaker, where I was an editor of practical law before coming back to Gunderson to build out an innovation team.
So where do we get Gunderson North Face jackets from? And will the first person with a question win one?
I'll never tell. This is partner meeting swag, so it's hard to come by.
Okay, so first question. Look, we got to start at the beginning, right? Which is, what is a legal engineer? And I want to put it to John because, again, when he gave his intro, just want to emphasize, he's an actual engineer, like a real life engineer. So I mean, yeah, he looks like us, right?
I can blend. I can pass. Well, I mean, it's a great question. I think it's probably at the moment it's still in flux. I think it's easier to kind of think about the different pieces of service delivery and how legal engineering fills a gap. So I think knowledge management, obviously, right? We're all very familiar with that practice, and I think in my mind, that's collecting and understanding what good looks like. What do we actually deliver to clients? What are the practices? What are the processes? Legal engineering kind of sits between that store of know-how and the people who manage that know-how. And there you think about how do we systematize and create repeatable process to take that know-how and deliver it to the associates or to the practitioners who will ultimately deliver it to a client. So it's about building repeatable processes to deliver knowledge and deliver work product. And I think the toolkit that people have to actually do that has changed pretty dramatically in the last 3 years. I think if you went back 5 years, I think legal engineering could probably, I mean, I wouldn't say it, but I think you could say succinctly it was document automation. That was a lot of what legal engineering was, and I think it's expanded pretty dramatically.
Oh, by the way, the timer. Okay. Okay, so we got this notion of legal engineering. This is not something that I think that we encounter in a lot of firms. And Joe, when I'm just going to take words that you gave me, right? You said you hired a legal engineer, and that person was a unicorn, and that person was John. And then John left.
It was very easy.
Yeah. So they don't work for the same firm. John, why would you use Joe that way?
I mean, it was a great partnership. We had a good run.
We're going to save this to the end.
I think I think it was we were both figuring out like what that role was,
yeah.
and I don't think we know still. We're still developing it.
Yeah, actually, when I was relatively new at practical law, John was a first-year associate at Gunderson.
That's right.
And we met at a cocktail party, and a mutual friend from the firm said, "Oh, you guys are you're interested in legal tech stuff. You should talk to each other." And that sort of began a friendship that carried through my time in practical law, coming back to the firm. John was at Latham at the time, had moved into like actually, having a role where he was doing legal engineering, at a big firm. And we worked on some projects together when we were at separate firms, and then it just felt so natural to bring him home to Gunderson. And yeah, I mean, it's very easy to build a legal engineering team, hiring your first engineer who happens to be a JD MBA, who's a mechanical engineer and a full stack developer and practice at the firm that you're working at. Like, you just build a whole team like that. It's great. So yeah, we brought John on, but for us, like, having that first legal engineer, having a first engineer, and this may not be one person unless you're able to hire John, which I encourage you all to do.
That is not the official Cooley position, by the way.
You'll be fine. No, I think that you're rarely going to find this in one person. So, kind of building a team that has the kind of skill sets and the way that they can work together to solve these kinds of problems. Once you can start showing a firm what's possible with that, bringing really good technologists and really good subject matter experts who can communicate really effectively and work well together to solve real problems. Boy, once you get a firm hooked on that, it grows, it snowballs.
I think if I could just jump in, I think one of the things we saw, like as the toolkit expanded, right, is the importance of collaboration, right? So working at Open Cap Table Coalition and creating data standards, right? Which is ultimately, if you want to automate things, you have to have some degree of standardization. So that was a key piece, right? And then B, LLMs. Obviously, I mean, I don't need to tell anyone here how transformative those were, but seeing, they democratized in a lot of ways the ability of people to automate, which is dramatically different.
Huge.
Yeah.
Okay, so I kind of want to dig into this because you both used a couple of keywords, and Megan, I know you have some examples you can give us. So, a few things that they said, right? Solving real problem, like there are terms. There is, let's be honest, within law firms and within knowledge management. I'm looking at all of us, right? There's always this slight academic-y, navel-gazing bent, right? We almost love this stuff too much, and sometimes we forget to solve real problems. And so when we're talking about this, and you use that term, an engineering mindset, right? What does that mean practically speaking when we talk about applying an engineering mindset to real problems in a law firm?
Yeah, so I have a couple examples. I'm thinking through sort of some of the initial use cases, right, that we sort of start with, very quickly turn into, well, like, who the hell is going to build this, right? So I think when we look at, like, even data extraction from our documents, let's just start with that simple one. It gets pretty complicated pretty quickly, and especially when you add in sort of these new tools that every day kind of have a new feature, our lawyers get extremely overwhelmed, and then we, tend to turn to our vendor, but we don't necessarily feel super confident in that, or we'd like to keep it in how we want our, the Cleary know-how to stay within Cleary. So I think looking at, to John's point, who is that person that can take what actually is a little bit more complicated than it might look at, might look at the first glance. You're not just pulling out a piece of data that is, easily extracted. That's why you want the tool to do it. You need someone that understands not only what you want the result to be, but how to build that. And I think that's where we get into needing more technical skills.
And this also, this crosses, this is another way of saying it just crosses functions, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just curious how, let's be honest, right? The moment you cross functions, you run into obstacles. How has that worked in practice? Again, through, the identification of the problem, right? The application of the skills, and then these humans and these other departments have to be brought on board and made a part of a successful process. What does that look like?
It's very challenging. I think for us, what we're finding is that right now, anything that is new and something that, like, we're really trying to focus on process and process mapping, right? So when we look at some of these cross-functional projects, it's even sort of like a market intelligence project that we might have that is for a practice group. The people that need to be involved in that process, there are like 7 functions when you actually get into it. And when we started process mapping, we got a lot of sort of, well, what I do is I call conflicts. And we had to kind of say, okay, but like who, how? Are you emailing them or are you calling them? Like, who are you? Like, if we want to automate this or sort of pull this into an actual AI-driven workflow, we need to know step by step. And that's where it gets really, really tricky and complicated. And people don't really want to talk about it, and people have all their feelings that come out about the other people that they're working with. So we've had a lot of therapy sessions as we go through this process mapping and how do we make this better? But the ultimate point I was trying to make is that sort of because this is all new, everyone calls it innovation. And so everyone calls us and says I need help, I can't figure out how to work with this person, and it's fine. But we're finding that there are a lot of roles or ideas that are coming up that aren't necessarily what we originally thought they would be. And that would be, sort of this legal engineering or process mapping turns into sort of like some maybe bigger issues that need to be resolved. So we're kind of diving into that too.
You guys ran into the same thing, and I'm curious about the process mapping aspect of this because, look, I'm gonna look around the room here. How many people remember the first wave of process mapping about a decade ago? And a lot of people got into it, right? I mean, it was like listen, we had. Look, I don't care. I'm retired. So Cyfarth comes up here, right? They show everything that they're doing. Some other firms grab it. A couple of financial institutions try it. It's super hot. Somebody comes up with the idea of handing out awards for learning how to process map. People get belts and badges and headbands, and it's super sexy, right? And then you go around the firms and they're like, yeah, we never got anything out of that. No, and it felt like in that first wave, it wasn't, what was lacking was tying it to the actual execution end. So not the definition of what the new process could be, but then the subsequent execution against that. Is that a part of what's changed? And why, if so, why now? What's helping us move in that direction of actually taking it to delivery versus just through that definitional phase that was disappointing, frankly, for a lot of firms?
Yeah, I think that's still hard. I wouldn't say that's solved by any means. The process mapping, I think, you could get into a level of granularity and complication that you're sort of you've lost the thread, and you're not really going to be able to do anything with that with the resources that you have. I think the increase in capabilities of what the technology is able to do allows us to attack things that are just kind of more obvious and kind of high level, and the tools are more flexible, so they don't need to be as rigidly defined, which I think opens it up to being able to solve more complex and interesting problems without needing to go like so in the weeds. But if the last mile is like communicating to people that this is how we're doing it now and then getting them to do it, like that's as hard a problem as it's ever been. But at least there's attention, and at least Brad Karp was up on the stage earlier, right? I mean, like they're senior leaders are focusing on this stuff in a way that I don't think they historically were, which is helpful.
Okay, so when you look at the tools, and again, I want to tie this back to, we've talked about AI over the course of the morning. And Patrick DiDomenico mentioned that 3 years ago he was like, I just don't want to be another AI piece. And like when you think about the fact that it really only has been about 3 years that we've been dealing with this. In the first wave, what really seemed was everybody just wanted to jump on and try things, right? And then, with all due respect to all of my vendor friends and relationships in the audience, right? Then there was a lot of, we have a tool that does X and we want to convince our firms to do X. But many firms, were not focused on their own problems, but were focused on what the tools could solve, irrespective of what they actually needed to accomplish internally. So is this a way to work with, I'm using AI vendors because I do think that they're extremely important to being able to deliver on this end. But does this sort of change that equation where you're going to them and saying, here's my problem? Because a lot of what we have lacked, right, is to be able to say, this is what I want to solve. Can you help me with this? How are you going to assist me with X? And so I'm just curious, is that changing your evaluations, your relationships, your perspective on how you're engaging with outside vendors to solve these problems and what that looks like versus just getting demo after demo after demo?
Well, if I could jump in, I think one thing that's become pretty clear to me, and it's related to this question around what's the relationship between the firm and the vendor. With all due respect to the vendors, they're great products, but there's an increasing convergence, right? And I think from the law firm's perspective, really one of the things we bring to the table that's differentiating, but also I think a necessary condition to using these tools well, is having your own sense of what the right answer is, and having it in a way that you can use to benchmark not just a vendor tool, but if you wanted to build your own tooling, right? You need to be able to do that quickly. And the fact that the technology has come so far, and it's so easy now to plug those data sets into various tools, means you can iterate really quickly. And it's that speed of iteration and the fact you can actually say to a vendor, I need it to do this. this is the right answer here, and your product does it in 80 or 90% of the time. This product does it 97% of the time, right? There's that objective benchmark, and it's essential.
I think for me, having not just a proliferation of AI tools, but AI capabilities that are built into kind of no-code and low-code tools opens up possibilities for all different kinds of technical, very technical, kind of traditionally technical, other people who are scrappy, and if you give them a tool, they'll figure out how to do stuff with it. And then subject matter experts, lawyers in many cases, who are willing to actually use the tools themselves. We have one of them who's recording me right now for some reason. Oh, great. Okay. It's all good.
You notice nobody has used any profanities on this panel because Stephanie's up there holding her phone.
So I think that when you have all these people with these different tools, including the ability to build things from scratch, and then you're going out and you say like, okay, so we understand the problems that we have. We know the tools that we have in our arsenal. We can go out and look to the market and see like, hey, is there a tool that I can buy that solves this problem and I don't have to do anything other than pay them? Great. That's usually my first option. But in looking at those tools, we also get a sense of how valuable is whatever this provider doing. Could we do this, with relatively minimal effort ourselves? And I think having all of those pieces in place lets you look at procurement and kind of problem solving in a totally different way, and allows you to skill up a bunch of people who can solve problems now, and they don't have to like go to Python, boot camp, for a year to learn how to do it.
Well, I think that gets back to the whole sort of what is a legal engineer question, right? Because it's figuring out, because it depends on the tool a little bit if you think about it, right? So if it is low code, no code, it doesn't, no offense to you, John, but doesn't need to be an actual engineer, right? Like you can sort of have the tinkerer or the person that wants to dive in that might actually have the subject matter expertise too. And we were talking before the panel of how we actually just hired, or we have 2 offers out for legal engineers, and one is for my team, and so my team already has a bunch of lawyers, and so we're looking for someone that's just pure technical that can sort of add that to our team. And then the Springbok team, which is our like internal dev shop, they have an offer out to a lawyer because that's what they need. So it's almost like as a team, we can have that capability versus sort of one person, the unicorn. We had to do it sort of with multiple people to be that role.
Yeah, and when I hear you talking about that, and I think about process mapping, and I feel like a part of what you're delivering, which is different, is the flexibility to address elements of the process requirement without going all in on a single, this tool does everything. Again, I'm not knocking tools, I'm not knocking platforms, right? But a lot of times it's, okay, we're going all in on X, we're going all in on Y. But here, I feel like you're being much more targeted in that way and giving yourselves the flexibility to lift and replace, to move into a new tool. Is that a part of what this legal engineering approach brings to the firm? Is that flexibility and the ability, this one isn't working as well, we're going to swap in this one, right? That we've actually built it that way from a data transfer standpoint, from a process standpoint. Just, is that a part of what we're going to start to see now in firms?
Yeah, I think 100%.
Yeah, it is for me for sure. I mean, we do like legal engineering show/tell events of, kind of like bring the whole team together to show what they're working on and show the tech stack that they're working on and kind of show other people who don't work in that tech stack what they can do and kind of what the capability of these different tools are, so that everybody on the team can be thinking about, well, yeah, maybe I could write an application to go, solve this problem, but they could probably do it a lot easier and it would require a lot less maintenance using that tool over there.
Yeah, it's about the reuse, and related to that too, it's starting with the idea, right, that these things should be modular, and making sure that you can get, to the extent that there's valuable firm knowledge in a platform, and this isn't always possible, but make sure you can actually get it out, and not only can you get it out, but you know how to use it with another product, right? Because if you can't do that, then you're locked in, and you're not able to practically swap in the best when it comes out.
In some ways, we're in a great place when it comes to that, because so much of the actual really hard work in these things is the prompting, which is just text, which you can cut and paste into a Word document and save and build in another system and see which one works better. So, I mean, there's certainly more engineering that goes into it, but so much of this is actually, kind of text-based that I think it actually makes a lot of these tools less entrapping.
Is this, and is this, so we have a room full of knowledge management innovation people or folks who are very interested in knowledge management and innovation. And when topics like this come up, as we go through these phases of evolution, there's always a moment where we sit around and think, could I do that? Would that be good for me? Where does KM and innovation sit in this regard? Is it at the level, is it because the prompting requires that knowledge and understanding of problems and outcomes? How does knowledge management fit in this legal engineering paradigm? Does it, and look, let's be honest, does it fall under KM? Who's in charge of this? Who gets the glory? Who does the work? Where does it fit?
I think that's a very good question. I think it's really firm dependent, and I think even my example earlier, but like, we don't really know, right? I think that it depends on what your team is trying to accomplish, and then figuring out who the right type of person is that you need to fill the gap on the team. For sure, I mean, this goes to my background, but I definitely think there is a huge place for KM in the equation. I don't know, it depends on sort of the technical abilities or desire that that person has, but I think they absolutely need to be part of the group, because to John's point, we need to define what the gold standard is and what we're working towards, and I think that's what the KM professionals do so well, right? It's sort of, that's what they've always done. I think you need that for sure.
Joe, I always love going back to the open cap table example. Like, I think the work that you and I did with other firms and Naveen, right? Gunderson's Chief Knowledge Management Officer is a great example of how all of these pieces can fit together, right? So we came up with a framework for how to standardize and structure the important information for company cap tables. But then there had to be this close collaboration between the knowledge management team and the practitioners on, well, what do we actually need to capture? And then I think the legal engineering role in that case was, how do you translate from a data structure, which is a couple data points, to the text, right? And there's no single answer for who does that.
Yeah, and this is where I think it kind of runs across a bunch of different capabilities that often, generally, you're not going to find in one person. I mean, even in that one, that was you didn't run off and do it yourself. Like, it was, it was a collaborative effort, right?
Multiple partners, Naveen, many people.
And many firms. I tend to think of KM and innovation and legal engineering as part of that, as being sort of a combination of product management and engineering. If you think of it from like a tech company perspective, like, I don't mean product management like we have some products that we buy and we manage them. I mean, like, the product is selling legal services, and we're building that. Like, how do we make that better? And that, as with any product, is a joint effort, a collaboration between people who are thinking kind of higher level about the product and the people who actually have to take those things and turn them into something that's actionable.
Okay, so the product is legal services, and John, when we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I asked what that would look like in a firm. Can we apply? Is there an 80-20 rule where we're improving, and then there's and how do you overcome the fact that every single lawyer in the firm is thinking, I'm smarter than your fucking machine, right? I'm a better writer. I'm better at reasoning. I have years of experience. I don't care how much data you've ingested. And you said something really interesting, which is that they don't know whether they're right or not.
I'm not sure if I said it quite like that, but something like that. Something like that. Yes.
She's not feeling it.
Don't just no.
All right. I would like everyone can go on LinkedIn and say that John said lawyers are not all that.
Do I get to clarify? Seems, yeah. No, I mean, I think I might have said it that way. I'm not sure, but what I was trying to get at was, I think one of the things that's been lacking in legal, and is, to be fair, probably hard to ever get, but I think certainly there's progress to be made in this front, is objective measurements of what the right answer is, right? And I think depending on what we're talking about, that's more or less easy, right? So where you have standardized forms, where the right answer is really an extraction of information, I mean, that's much easier to say objectively true, right? Like, did you get the right date? Did you get the right person? Not a lot of nuance there. Obviously, there are things that get much more in the weeds. There are certain firms that focus almost exclusively on bespoke agreements, right? So there's a spectrum there.
Yeah.
But I think my point, what I was trying to say is, you can't even really start the process of automating a process if you don't have a baseline. right? You need some kind of an objective baseline that's hopefully reasonably quantitative, and that will at least let you say, can your fucking machine do it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and if you don't have that, you can't answer that question, and it's all just speculation.
So give us just a little sense more. What goes into establishing that kind of bench line, that kind of benchmark, right? How do we say, this is where we're starting from, this is what we need to meet or improve on?
It's a lot easier with extraction right now. So, there's a lot of great products in the space to do this, actually. And getting essentially a manual version of what the right answer looks like for a given set of documents, for a given set of templates, that's an exercise that attorneys know how to do, and historically, many actually did on their own, right? And to the extent that CAM was involved, maybe they'd build these big Excel sheets. But that's essentially a benchmark, right? And if you then take that and you pit that against the machine, you say, how close is the machine to what we think is right? And if you go through that exercise, I guarantee you will find mistakes in the human work. I mean, not necessarily to a point that it's material, but like there will be mistakes. And it will vary depending on the work and the person who did it and how much time they spent. And I think you'll see that whatever benchmark you create, if you want to do, for example, attorney preference score, which you might need to do for something that's less subjective, where it's just, is this the right clause, or is this an acceptable way of handling the situation? In that case, you might ask subject matter experts to say, I don't know, red, yellow, green, high, medium, low, like 1 to 5, right? You need to find ways to create some kind of a objective measurement. And it's still, honestly, the right answer how to do that. I certainly don't have the answer.
Yeah, it's a super hard problem. And this, anytime I go to a panel where people are talking about ROI of like product, like legal tech products in practice, I'm like, I mean, maybe there's a few products where there's sort of like a straight line between like, this paid it, we got paid back from this, buying this product. But the reality is like, what you're saying, like, oh, reductions in write-offs, how many variables influence, whether there's reductions in write-offs, and the variables in each of these different deals. I mean, it's so apples and oranges, it's very hard to compare. But I agree with John. I mean, it's good to try. It's certainly where you can, to think of at least, and at least programmatically across the firm to have benchmarks that you're looking at about whether the things that you're doing, the interventions that you're making, seem to be pushing the metrics that you care about in the right direction. And I think there's not enough of that.
Well, and I mean, if that's a part of the engineering mindset, I feel like that in and of itself would be a win for any firm, right? Is just taking the trouble to define what does a benchmark look like, what does success look like, and building it from there. And I think that's, again, I'm going back to this whole engineering mindset piece, because it feels to me that there are discrete elements in this that even if you don't immediately go all in, you don't have a unicorn, you're building your team, that there are discrete elements here that you can ultimately use to build up to that point, because they are going to deliver value to the firm. And that seems to be a part of what you're sharing in terms of how this looks in real life.
I think it's conversations that just historically haven't been had, right? So I think because it's hard when you have multiple people weighing in on what best looks like. So I think having that initial conversation that when you start a project or like a build, what does success look like? And sort of getting that on the table with everyone right from the beginning. That to me sort of feels like that engineering mind, like everyone's sort of defining the scope in a way that then you can work off of. But that, as we all know in this room, is really hard in a law firm because there aren't a lot of, I feel like the differing opinions make it challenging.
Although I would say there's a constituency that probably has a lot of experience doing this, and it's document automation experts. Because anyone who's gone through the challenge of getting alignment on, well, what should the form look like, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of the same exercise, right? Obviously, it's a less quantitative exercise, but you at least get people aligned on, this is the right answer, these are the features we need to have, these are the questions we need to ask to actually generate the document, right? There's a lot of commonality in both of those exercises.
It's a great point, actually. I mean, like form development, even in kind of a pre, document automation world, had a similar forcing function of just trying to get people on the same page and make choices about these are the trade-offs we're willing to live with, this is how much optionality we need to build into this. And like that same, kind of muscle that gets built through doing that exercise to document automation, it's the same thing that kind of carries through to doing, more complex, software projects and solutioning. It's this, how do we get enough people together around what the problem is and not, kind of overcomplicate it to the point of making it useless.
So when we're looking at building these teams, Megan, you made a comment to me in advance of the session. You said that you're looking for people with eclectic backgrounds, who can really who have a passion for process. I thought that was really interesting, and I'm bringing it up now because of the comments that were just made, which is, approaching this from different angles is something that an outside new perspective could be really helpful to. So what did you mean when you're talking about eclectic backgrounds? I mean, do you mean they play the electric guitar, or they come from, or they're former mechanical engineers?
Both of those are great. No, I think there's sort of something. First of all, I feel like you need to have someone that's sort of just like slightly obsessive about this area, right? Because I think that's like, I'm like looking at my team here, or my coworkers. Like we're all sort of, working on the weekend and sort of building these things because we want to, which is maybe bizarre, but I think that is kind of across this industry a little bit. But yeah, I think to have a team that can deliver on this kind of new world, this new ask, I think we need to have people. I was just telling these guys that, the Springbok team that we have at Cleary, they're entrepreneurs, right? So they kind of like say all the things that, as a former associate, I like die inside, right? Because like you don't say that, but we need that. Like we need that. So I think we need people bringing different perspective.
Yeah, eclectic is a good, eclectic backgrounds I like, but even, people who come from more traditional backgrounds, I look for curiosity and kind of openness and seeming like mental agility. I think it requires a willingness to kind of deal with things that are kind of messy, not be too rigid in your approach, and also kind of an entrepreneurial mindset or at least kind of aptitude. Those are the things that I tend to look for. And when I look back at the people that I've hired who I think have been the most successful in these kinds of roles, whether attorneys or technologists, they tend to share those traits.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, John, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I agree with everything that's been said. It's sort of that cross-disciplinary curiosity. Like, it doesn't have to be formal training, right? I mean, one of the folks that I've hired in the past was originally, I think he was an aeronautical engineer, right? And he's not been a lawyer, never been a lawyer, but has always been interested in the law and certain aspects of structuring it, right? And so you just want someone who like has that agility, right?
No, that's great. Look, and we're all going to look on LinkedIn for aerospace engineers when this is over.
Sorry.
We've got, guys, we have 2.5 minutes, which gives me time for maybe 1.5 questions. So I just want to jump in and go, is there anything anybody wanted to ask the panel as we talk about this? Yes.
We're
sir.
starting with the half question, by the way.
Hold on, let me bring you the mic.
Hi, I'm Pretty. I'm from Levenfeld-Pelstein. I was a legal process engineer, so I have a question. Kind of, you said 5 years ago was about process. What would you say is like the one thing that people would focus on? And let's not say AI, but like more of a more focused approach, I guess, since before it was process.
I think it's still about process. I think it's maybe we have new tools to kind of deal with that, but fundamentally, we're talking about lawyers who are delivering services or software that's delivering services. You have to understand like what's required to do the thing, and that's process.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely process. It's also what's flowing across the process. So is there structured information? Can you represent it in a totally structured format? What are the blocks of text that are kind of created, consumed, right, in different steps? It's still process.
Yeah.
Is anybody else? We have time for one more. Remember the wave. Oh, sure.
I'll be really quick. It almost sounds as if what you're doing is also being done inside the vendors. I suspect the vendors have people that do what you do. So are you simply getting ahead of them? Those of us that can't afford maybe to although if any of you are interested in moving to Nashville, please come see me. But are you just sort of getting 2 or 3 years ahead of where the vendors are? You understand the question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. And I actually, in many cases, view the vendors as extensions of our team in the way that we work with them. We have consultants too, right? So, I mean, it's, many of the things that are kind of, people who I would consider to be in the legal engineering sphere are building on third-party products in one way or another, right? I mean, even our full-stack engineers are building on third-party products. And so, the vendors where we have, kind of strong partnerships and can leverage those relationships and also influence their product direction to work for the things that we're trying to do, that's like, a fluid boundary. And so I think that if you don't have the in-house resources to, kind of do a lot off on your own, really engaging with vendors, not just kind of buying a product and focusing on, it's turnkey, you roll it out, you get people to adopt it, but like actually working with them on the product side is a great way to get started, I think, with this.
Super. And if you do want to move to Nashville, there you go.
Music City.
Guys, thank you very much. I really appreciate this. Thank you for